Okay, I reckon we may as well get started. I'll do a little bit of an intro for everybody before introducing you to Dan. Just some housekeeping first. My name is Brendan Ritchie. I am the Chief Growth Officer here at First Focus. Today, I won't be doing too much talking. I will leave most of that to Dan Maker, our cybersecurity consultant and expert in all things security and AI and a lot of other things too, I assume. Based out of WA, I'm up in the Brisbane office today. A couple of things you need to know before we get stuck into today's topic, which is AI. Is it worth the risk? We have had quite a few questions come through to us before the event. So the way we're going to run today is that we're going to have about 20 minutes for Dan to chat, run through his prepared presentation. After that, we're going to have about 20 minutes of Q&A and then a little wrap up piece that I will come back to you on. I do want to say actually a little plug here. You're here because you are looking to get ahead of the curve, mitigate risk, learn more, etc. So you're probably the exact type of person we want watching our podcast, which comes out every fortnight. It started 2 weeks ago, Monday. So our first episode was all about Copilot with Mia Tate, she is our Microsoft practice lead at First Focus. Our episode coming out Monday coming in a few days is all about data risk and making sure you get the most out of your data through ISO 27001 certification, how that works. The whole point is to leave you with real world takeaways that you can take back to your business. So very hands-on, applicable information provided. I'll stop plugging that, but you can find it. It's called Business Focus on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Go nuts. So, okay, with all of that said, I am going to mute my microphone, let Dan take over and give him the floor.
All right. Thanks for that, Brendan. Now, I assume my screen sharing is working okay. Can we see
Looks good to me.
the slide deck? Excellent. All right. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who I haven't met yet, just a quick intro on myself. I've been with First Focus since about 2017, primarily doing infrastructure roles before that, but really sort of pivoted into that security space, more or less when I started with First Focus. So we've been doing a lot of sort of technical implementations, both large and small, simple and complex. Really sort of covered quite a wide gamut of the security space. Big thing that we've been doing a lot of in the last couple of years is sort of assessments of clients and really sort of taking them on that journey to help mature their cybersecurity posture. So Essential 8's been something that we've done a lot of work with, and that was the last webinar that I did for everybody. That I think is still available on our socials. So that's where we've been spending a lot of time of late. But obviously, AI has become. I mean, it's been a hot topic for a little while, but it's really sort of exploded in I guess more recent times. So that's what we'll run through today. In terms of when we're talking about AI, everybody loves to throw the acronym around, but what is it that we're really talking about? There's sort of three major technologies or three major categories that come up when we are talking about AI. And those things are machine learning, natural language processing, and generative AI. So particularly when we're talking about the increase or growth in AI in sort of recent times, when you're talking about things like ChatGPT and Copilot, we're really getting into that generative AI. So how that sort of differs from previous iterations of what might be classed as AI is generative AI is an artificial intelligence that can train on a set of data and make inferences and actually generate content that is not just regurgitating stuff that it's learnt. So it's actually able to generatively create sort of more dynamic content, which is really sort of what we're talking about when we're talking about things like Copilot, things like ChatGPT, and sort of technologies like that come up. So what should we be worried about with AI? Now, this is sort of the topics of what we're going to go over today. So I've largely split risks around AI into two broad categories. So we've got this first category here, which we've called AI enhanced or AI driven attacks, which are, I guess, attacks that are enabled by AI in some fashion. So these might be more classical cybersecurity type attacks or exploitation of individuals and businesses and things like that that are enabled by AI. We're also starting to see sort of malware that is driven by AI. So it might download a large language model and actually write its own code on the fly, which sort of makes it very difficult to detect. Don't want to spend too much time on that today, largely because there's a lot of people out there that have done years and years of research into this and are far better armed to talk about that. So again, one of the links that sort of Brendan mentioned earlier there, I've got a link to a gentleman by the name of Mikko Hyppinen, who has been doing AI security research for many, many years and has done quite a good keynote that he's presented all around the world. So that is one of the flavors of that. If you search his name on YouTube, you will find a series of the same sort of keynote with a bit of a different twist, but well worth the watch if you've got a spare half an hour somewhere along the way. What I really do want to talk about today is what I like to call data assurance risks. So this is the sort of risks that come up through the usage of AI in your business. So not so much an external attacker using AI to try and compromise your business, but when you're using AI, what are the things that you need to be aware of? So we're going to run through each of these four. I'm going to run through basically what are those headlines, what is the risk specifically around those, and then towards the end there we'll talk about the sort of things that you can do about sort of managing that risk. So to dive into the first one there, we've got AI poisoning. So you may have heard that sort of term bandied around. What does it mean? Essentially, these generative AI models and most AIs are trained on a set of data. Now, this might be a publicly available set of data. It might be proprietary information if you're running an AI inside of your business. But there will be some sort of training set of data. We've got to educate the AI engine into what do we want it to be able to do, right? AI poisoning is all around if the data that it receives is not of a good quality, if it's not ethically sort of sourced, I guess, if it's not accurate, what is that going to mean for the results out the other end? So a very early example, going all the way back to 2016, there was a Twitter chatbot by the name of Tay that Microsoft put together, and it would read tweets in, and you could so it would read tweets sort of out on Twitter or X now, as they like to be called, and people could tweet to that account, and they would receive sort of chatbot-like responses. Because there was sort of no filter on what it was reading in from these tweets, within about 16 hours of launch, Microsoft had to take it offline and issue a public apology. It had read in so much inflammatory content that it had learnt that content and then was starting to, when asked fairly benign questions, would give a fairly inflammatory or inappropriate response. So that's a pretty extreme example, but it's a good one that was sort of out in the public eye at the time. So what you might see, I guess, in sort of, I guess, a more subtle sense is it might be manipulation of particular data sets, the inclusion or exclusion of data sets in the training, that again, end of the day, you might be getting a result that maybe isn't accurate or what is intended based on the data that has been used to train the AI engine. The next thing that we like to talk about is I guess the partially a direct result of that poisoning, but it can sort of come outside of that, is AI hallucinations or accuracy issues. So again, this generative AI, what we're really sort of getting into at the moment, it can generate its own content. So learns all the data, it generates its own content based on the queries and requests that are made of it. I guess the question is those results actually accurate? So again, fun little game, I guess, for people to have a go at that demonstrates hallucinations. You'll see that URL there for a website called whichfaceisreal.com. If you go to that website, you'll be presented with two pictures, two people's faces. One of them will be completely AI generated. It is not a real person. The other one will be a stock photo of a real person somewhere. and people will struggle to pick which one is real, right? So at cursory glance, both outputs look accurate. But when you start to look at the AI generated photos very closely, you might see that somebody has a weird looking earlobe, or their eyebrow runs for a little bit too long, or their one eye is glazed over, or something like that. There'll be some little tell where the AI has hallucinated a bit and given something that's not quite human. So that's a good example of AI hallucinations, right? So again, sort of winding that back to I guess a less fun, more business oriented sense. If you're asking it to retrieve a bunch of data from a series of data sets, how do you know that that's accurate? You want to have, if you're going to make decisions based on that data, you need to have that assurance that what you've got is not a hallucination, and you can actually rely on that feedback. Next one is intellectual property. So again, when we're feeding all this information to the AI, this might be proprietary data, it might be data that's in the public domain. And again, as it generates, or it goes through that generative process, it's generating content that, maybe you would, as a sort of a marketing person, you might have had to sit down and write some copy, or a graphic designer might have had to draw a picture. Well, now you can just ask one of these AI engines, hey, draft me up copy that says X, Y, and Z, or show me a picture of whatever the graphic designer was trying to draw. It does raise some, I guess, some intellectual property issues around who owns that output. Is it you because you asked it the right question? Is it the vendor or the whoever's providing that AI engine? If you're using it to imitate either real people or copyrighted works or anything like that, where is the line? Where do we draw sort of what's okay and what's not? Again, this should come through in the notes. We do have I guess and I sort of encourage you to click on this link with a little bit of caution. But there's a link to a YouTube video from a channel called There I Ruined It, and it will play a song that is called Barbie Girl, but it's done in the voice of Johnny Cash, all completely AI generated. So, sort of a practical example of this, if you could go back and ask Johnny Cash, would you like to sing a song called Barbie Girl, all about, sort of that sort of topic? Would they be okay with that? Or would he be okay with that? Maybe not. But it is a concern that is going to be one of the headline sort of discussions, I think, going forward. And finally, probably the one that people most sort of, I guess, care about is around data leakage. So in the cybersecurity sense, data leakage is what we sort of coin as a term that's any sort of confidential or proprietary company data that ends up out in the public domain or out in front of the eyes of people who shouldn't otherwise have access to it. Right. So there's a number of ways traditionally that this could happen. We might have a disgruntled employee emailing all of their files to their personal email account before they go and work for a competitor. You could have somebody hack in and steal that data and sort of expose it on the dark web. You could have poor security controls where something gets published that maybe wasn't supposed to. That's the sort of traditional data leakage. I guess where AI sort of plays into it is, again, around that sort of training data. If you're using an AI engine and you are uploading or you're training it on a series of company or proprietary data, or it has access to a whole series of company and proprietary data, is there a way that somebody else can extract that in a way that wasn't intended? Can that be put down to the public domain? Can somebody get access to it that they shouldn't have access to otherwise, right? Sorry, I'll just skip through all those transitions. So I've taken the liberty of, I guess, going into a couple of the major AIs that people are probably most interested in using or most using at the moment, and sort of collected their trading statements. So where we've got ChatGPT to start off with there, what are they doing with any sort of data that you provide it? So this could be queries, this could be data in their training sets, that sort of thing. And I guess the official line here from ChatGPT is If you've got a personal account, so if you've just signed up for ChatGPT free, your data is part of the training set. Anything that you give that engine, any questions you ask it, any content you upload to try and train it and refine your results, that becomes part of the training set. You actually have to opt out if that's not something that you want to happen. In terms of enterprise accounts, so where a business is signed up for the paid version of the service and is actually using it in a commercial sense, ChatGPT will store everything that you upload it, everything that you give it in any way, shape, or form, but it's not included on the training model. Obviously, got the links there to where OpenAI have published that information. On the other hand, Microsoft Copilot for Office 365, which is probably the one that sort of most businesses seem to be sort of most excited about at the moment. I guess the interesting thing with Copilot is while it doesn't train on your data, it has access to all of your data. So when a user makes a request of Copilot, Copilot for 365 can actually see everything that user can see. So it's no longer enough that it was never good enough that you were sort of securing data by obscuring it and making it difficult for people to access. If you do have any sort of weaknesses in your permission sets, in your knowledge of where your data assets live, things like that, Copilot can really highlight that, because if the user has access to it, they can access it very quickly with a natural language query to Copilot. So yeah, fundamentally beyond that, it's not used as part of training, so it kind of takes that training concern away. But again, these are two of the major sort of AI engines. They're obviously not the only ones. There's plenty of open source large language models. There's large language models that you can run on your personal computer and all that sort of thing. So these are obviously just two examples, but it does vary by AI engine and by the service. So we've been through all the major risks from a data assurance perspective. So question is AI worth the risk? Now, from my perspective, or from a security perspective, the way that we really want, the sort of key takeaway is you can't avoid it, so you need to manage it, right? It's going to, it's going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to I guess, be more involved in day-to-day computing and usage of information assets. So the worst thing you can do is stick your head in the sand and say, no, we're not going to utilize AI. We're going to try and block it for everybody, because you'll be playing whack-a-mole forevermore, and there will be, I guess, sort of failings in that kind of implementation. So I guess the one key takeaway, if you don't walk away from here knowing nothing less, it's be proactive and manage use of AI in the business. So I've probably given everybody a whole lot to think about, and you're sort of sitting there going, well, what can I do? So again, sorry, one slide too many there. As I said, the biggest thing you can do is be proactive, right? Have a policy, come up with how you want AI used within the business. Is it something that you want to use something like Copilot and it's a bolt-on for your productivity suite? Is there some sort of key market differentiator you can have that, if you used an AI engine in some way, it becomes a core part of your business? There's a number of ways you can use AI, and there's people far better positioned to talk about it than I am, but fundamentally, you need to work out how you want to use AI within the business, and then have a policy that backs that up. You want to enable staff to use it properly. As I said, the worst thing you can do is kind of do nothing, or take no, we're not using it in our environment at all. Once you have worked out how you want to use AI within the business, you really want to manage that AI service or that AI software or that AI platform like you would any other vendor or supplier, right? So an organization that's being proactive around its protection of its information assets. If you're going to sign up to a new cloud service, if you're going to adopt a new piece of software, typically there is a risk management process that you would adopt before signing on the dotted line with that supplier. Same thing goes for AI engines. Now, this doesn't matter whether it's a cloud service, whether it is um, you're downloading an open source AI large language model to run locally. You can apply those principles to that service regardless, right? And if you're not proactively managing your vendors in that way, that's probably a bigger concern, right? Because even before AI became a big thing, you were still, say, putting all your data with Office 365. You were still using Dropbox. You were still using whatever other cloud services that you might be using. You basically need to be proactive about managing and understanding the risks of having what data assets with what vendors and what providers. Um, Specifically around AI, when you're assessing one of these vendors, you really want to have a look at what their security practices look like. Do they align with your own objectives? So if you're aiming to go down a particular route, either from a framework or just from a security positioning standpoint, is that AI service in line with that? Are they going to cause you any headaches from I guess, a security governance or security practices point of view? You also need to be comfortable with what you're uploading. If you're not classifying your data at the moment, this is where the sort of the data leakage side of things comes into it. Obviously, the AI engine can't leak anything it has no knowledge of, right? So you need to understand the use case, know what you're uploading to these AI engines. Particularly with hallucinations, you also need to understand the risks of making decisions based on AI outputs. So generative AI in I guess, its current state and for the foreseeable future, hallucination will be an issue. Even if your training sets are perfect, even if you could have the best sort of service in the world, there's going to be some hallucinations, right? What happens if you make a critical decision on that? And again, this is particular to your use case. If you're using it to draft up copy that a marketing person is then going to run through and touch up or something like that, it's not a critical business issue because you've had a human kind of who's hopefully a qualified professional go through and finesse that data and make it less, sort of identify those hallucinations and remove them. If you're using it to collect large sort of data sets and distill them down into something that a business decision is made on, you really need to have a process in there to validate that data and make sure that there's no hallucinations or accuracy issues with what you're getting out before you make a critical decision. You do need to sort of govern what construes acceptable use. Now, this is both a policy and I guess, a technical control solution. So, you tackle this from a policy perspective, where you might have an acceptable use policy that includes, or you have policy statements that includes how people should be using AI, what is considered acceptable to the business in terms of use of AI. You may also have controls in place that might have some web filtering that allows access to ChatGPT, for example, because that is deemed by the business to be, you're paying for the service and it's been adopted by the business, but you're not allowing access to AI X, Y, and Z, for example. Again, kind of along the similar sort of track is, again, once we give people access to the data, they might be trying to upload stuff that is not deemed suitable. So this is where your data leakage comes in. So you might have, so if you're in Office 365, you might have their data leakage prevention software or service configured to try and identify the removal of that data from where it resides in Office 365 to the AI engine, for example. And again, this comes with the same with any other cloud service. You really need to make sure that that service is secured appropriately. So you need to think about it from terms of an outside attacker compromises the service in some way. So that's very sort of old school security, I guess. There's nothing sort of new and fancy in that sort of last dot point. It's making sure that the vendor is taking security seriously. Have you got MFA on all your accounts? Are you monitoring the usage of those accounts? All that sort of stuff. As sort of some general guidelines, just to try and minimize I guess, harm that AI services could cause is, like I said, you can consider what technical controls, and again, this will be specific to the AI service that you're looking at making use of. As a general rule, upload data sparingly. Again, the AI can't leak, people can't misuse, you can't poison data it doesn't have. If there's no tangible business benefit to ingesting that data, basically don't upload it. Keeping across the ethics in AI is a really good thing, especially if you're going to be using AI for doing that sort of generative work that might have been done by like I say, a marketing person or a graphic designer or an author, anything like that that might be, I guess, sort of copyrighted or using somebody's likeness. It is something that is still evolving, right? The ethics behind AI is a big topic. OpenAI have lots and lots of content on it. It's really one to sort of keep across if you're going to make AI a sort of core part of your business technology stack. The other sort of bit of guidance that I've sort of said to sort of far and wide to anybody who listen is the sort of best advice I can give you for things like ChatGPT or Copilot, where you're using it to generate content, is use it as a shortcut. Use it to do that first draft. Use it to sort of come up with an idea to get past writer's block, that sort of thing. It's not a replacement for base knowledge of a person yet. So again, that's sort of trying to screen against hallucinations and accuracy, and also trying to identify some of that intellectual property stuff. Don't be it as use something AI generated and go straight out the door without somebody sort of having a look at it and understanding it. And finally, and again, possibly the most important, is educate, train your staff. Like all security controls, your biggest asset and your biggest liability are going to be the people using the service. You can have all the technical controls in the world. You can have the best written policies out there. If somebody's determined enough, they will be able to misuse it in some way. So really take the time to, again, once you've decided on a use case and how you want to use AI within the business, make sure you educate and train your staff. That's and again, sort of another key takeaway there.
Love your work, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's it for me. Again, there's a couple of links there to for some further reading. But yeah, Brendan, back over to you.
Well, make sure we send that through. That'll be included in the information we send through in the next 24 hours or so. I do think the key thing that stood out for me there, obviously huge opportunity with AI, regardless of the industry you're in, but also plenty of risk. And one of those clear risks is if you don't have permissions right, Copilot is going to make it easier than ever for people to find things they shouldn't necessarily have access to. So probably one of the key takeaways for everyone from this. But now I would like to jump into questions, because we do have a lot of them. And I'm going to, first of all, thank you to everyone who has submitted the questions. I'm going to go through them in the order with which I can most easily access, or sorry, the least easy access I have. One's come through that I have to find on my computer. So I'm going to open up this awkwardly at length, and I am going to hit up this first question. Okay. So for marketing agencies leveraging AI on behalf of their clients, what are the security risks? What are the best practices to leverage the tools while maintaining privacy and security? Should agencies offer their clients an opt-out of using AI? Should agencies let their clients know they are using AI tools, and their policies?
Yeah, so fair bit to unpack there. I guess what we've just covered there is, sort of what you really need to, before you even sort of start forming, I guess, solutions to some of those issues posed there, is you need to understand how you're going to use AI, right? If you're just going to use it to go and find all the campaigns that we've done that are along the lines of X, Y, and Z, say you ask Copilot something like that, do you need to tell your staff you're using that? It's stuff that is still housed within Office 365. It is still, you're just accessing it a slightly different way than if you manually went through, say, SharePoint or OneDrive or something to locate it. Probably not a big concern for most people. You're using something that's integrated into the platform. And again, as long as you've sort of gone through all those things that I've talked about there, probably not a big concern. I guess we're particularly in sort of that marketing space where you would start to get concerned is where you're starting to really leverage that generative response and you're starting to generate content, particularly where it is people's likeness, where it's companies' likeness, where it's something that could be misconstrued as something that is generated by somebody else. Absolutely, I would be very upfront around that. And again, you drive that with your policy. If you decide you want to give your clients the opportunity to opt out, that's certainly a valid use case. Really, it does come down to you, but it's really that sort of generative usage of it that I'd really be watching for. Yeah, and obviously, yeah, like I say, if you are going to use anybody else's likeness, anybody else, what might be somebody else's copyrighted information, you do have to be a little bit careful around that. And I absolutely would be on the front foot in communicating the usage of that to potential clients.
Yeah, my 2 cents just with my marketing hat on there is that having a really strong set of AI policies, which you can include in your MSA with any client, as a marketer, would position you as probably head of the pack at the moment. I also think, what are you using AI to do? Is it to increase the quantity of output or the quality of output? And I think the answer to that question will probably determine whether you think you need to specifically I guess identify the use of that AI and the outcomes that you're creating. But yeah, I think for a start, having an AI policy would be a hell of a good place. Not only because then your clients understand what's happening, but then also your staff understand, how they're able to use AI in the creation of the work they're performing. That's my 2 cents with my marketing hat on. Discuss. No, we don't have time. What we'll do instead is go into the next question. This one has come through prior to the event, actually. So this person has just said that they would like to know more about AI governance, and specifically what tools Microsoft offers to protect data privacy.
Yeah, I'll kind of split that up into governance and what Microsoft are doing, because they're two kind of very different, I guess, things. Governance, it probably depends on sort of how you're going to leverage your AI, right? Not every business is going to integrate it in I guess, a critical business function. It might be more of a glorified search engine in some cases. Particularly with a lot of the Copilot use cases, you might be using it to help aggregate data quite quickly. In terms of governance, you probably need you still need something. You still need to be proactive, right? I don't want to take away from that. But if your use case is fairly light on, if you're not making critical business decisions based on outputs, if you're not doing client-facing outputs based on those generative outputs, you can probably get away with a fairly light on governance program. So this might be things like additions to your acceptable use policy. This might be so again, some sort of managing as you would any other supplier, right? If you're going to integrate it into critical business functions, so your business is going to be in a state where it, I guess, can't do its main mission without the use of a particular AI platform. There is a ISO standard for AI governance, and it's 42001. That has a whole framework in terms of how to govern, implement, maintain AI systems, both on premise and in cloud. It's technology agnostic, I guess, other than the fact that AI is the subject. That would be a worthwhile certification process for an organization who really needs to nail that AI governance side of things. Sort of spinning off into the Microsoft side of things, again, because the way that Copilot fundamentally is, and I'm talking about Copilot for 365 here, it's an augment to existing tool sets within Office 365, right? So it's not, it's using existing ways of accessing data. It's using, I guess, the only thing that's sort of special around it is the fact it is an AI engine going in and retrieving that data. So it is still subject to all of the 365 security controls that most organizations should be sort of, if they're in their 365 platform, that they should be sort of leveraging. So there's not really anything new and special in terms of Copilot for 365 and and I guess AI governance or data privacy, but there is a set of very mature controls already within the 365 platform.
Dan, sorry, what was the AI ISO number?
It was
46?
42,001.
Right. And you and I were talking about this earlier, but I know there's a push to make that a certifiable or a certification you can get. And talking to our friend Jason from ISO 365, well, not that long ago, ISO 27001, which is, all about data, uh, that was seen as sort of a big end of town play, that you really didn't need that if you were below a certain size, maybe below 50 mil was the number he gave me in terms of revenue. And that's just no longer the case. It's
No,
applicable
not
to
at all.
everybody. And I see that going the same way with AI within a relatively short period of time. So yeah, 42,001 definitely a standard to keep your eyes on. Okay, let's go on to a next question, which is this one comes from Peter. Thank you, Peter. How do we make the use of Copilot in tenancy? Well, sorry, how do we make use of the Copilot in tenancy AI tool, ensuring access to our information along with their LLM, but without sharing our information? So essentially an in-house GPT kind of a thing.
Yep. So like a sort of covered in the deck there, Copilot for 365 doesn't train on your data at the moment. That's the official Microsoft stance on it. So it has access, the access model that's, I guess, linked to Copilot for 365 is when the user makes a query to Copilot, it can basically see any 365 data assets that that user can at least have read access of. So all your usual controls in terms of your 365 platform, so your permissions on your SharePoint sites, your organizational data sharing, anything that you're doing in sort of Entra ID to lock down your 365 platform, all still applies when you're using Copilot.
Okay. I've got another question here. So I'm just scrolling. Okay. So how can AI help us make our Microsoft environment more secure?
Mm-hmm.
The question comes from Meadow.
Yep. So security Copilot is a thing. Microsoft love sort of banding the Copilot name and sort of
Slapping
using
something
it
on
to
the
mean,
front of it.
yeah, using it to mean a whole bunch of different things. So just saying you've got Microsoft Copilot or you're using Microsoft Copilot means you could be using any one of I think I saw a presentation from a Microsoft engineer saying something like that in the entire Microsoft ecosystem, something like 30 different Copilots. And there is a security Copilot, right? At the moment, in its current iteration, it is an augment for your security staff. It's it doesn't do as much to, like, it doesn't automate controls or things like that, but it can help an incident responder or a SOC analyst go through, investigate incidents more quickly, identify gaps in your existing your existing real estate, do all those sort of things. So it's more of a force multiplier at the moment rather than turn this on and it takes care of security for you.
Right. Okay. So it will amplify best practice or is in addition to
Yeah,
best practice. There's nothing at this
yeah.
moment that
So
will just simply in
yeah, so
itself.
yeah, it'll make you, it'll let you do more with less security staff, and it'll help those security staff that you do have make decisions or better decisions quicker. So yeah, it's really an augment. It's not a replacement for security stuff. Like I say, you can't just go and tick the box, turn it on, and expect your security in your 365 space to start increasing.
Okay, but it's definitely a productivity tool, a proactive tool,
Yeah.
depending how it's utilized.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and really probably everything else.
I guess a good example from an incident response perspective, when we're investigating an attack, there's usually thousands and thousands of log entries that we'll need to go through to try and reconstruct what a bad actor might have done on somebody's network. Traditionally, that is a highly skilled role. Like, you need to understand the logs from the system that's being ingested from you. You need to understand the query language of what you're using to collect the logs. There's a whole bunch of, I guess, training and investment that needs to be made in that SOC analyst before they are effective. Copilot means I could ask Copilot in natural language, I want to see everything that this server did between time X and time Y, and it will summarize it for me. So that's probably a good example of how that sort of enables that SOC analyst to do a lot more with less. Right? I haven't had to
Yeah, I love
construct a
that.
big long query. I've been able to ask in natural language what I want to see, and Copilot in theory should be dishing that up.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic example. I think in general, the way I see AI is it democratizes talent, right? It
Mm.
increases the floor height to a certain degree. Everyone can do more,
Yeah.
but the upper end is still potentially quite a far way away for most people.
Mhm.
Okay. Again, feel free to slap down any of these things I'm saying. What do I know? But but so far so good. Okay. Next question coming from Lauren. How can we protect, mitigate risk against data leakage when using AI programs in a clinical medical setting that involves storage of sensitive patient information?
Yep. So again, I'm going to sound a little bit like a record stuck on repeat here, but how are you managing your data at the moment? And you need to be very particular around how you use AI within the business. So how are you securing that data at the moment? How are you blocking data leakage? So if we are talking, sort of medical data, and we're talking it being stored in Office 365, let's say in SharePoint or email or something like that, have you got data leakage prevention turned on? Have you configured all those policies for all those medical data types? Do you have any specific data types that you've had to create in the data leakage prevention platform? Doing things like that, and obviously more traditional stuff around permissions and not letting people have access to things that they don't have a business need to, all that sort of stuff. AI doesn't change that, right? It if anything, it just like I kind of said earlier, it'll highlight those weaknesses if you haven't been proactive around managing those things.
What I would say to Lauren, it was Lauren, wasn't it? Yes, sorry, Lauren. Definitely take a look. I know this sounds like a plug, but it's very well timed. The podcast episode Business Focus coming out on Monday is all about ISO 27001, which is data, looking after your data, and particularly with reference to what they call the CIA triad, so confidentiality, integrity, accessibility, right? So AI in itself, as far as I was told by my subject matter expert guest during that recording, it's not necessarily it's a risk, right? It's a risk that you have to identify in the use of accessibility of that data, the integrity of that data.
Yep.
So it's something that you would manage as part of that standard as it stands right now anyway. So I would strongly suggest subscribing on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. Could I not sell this anymore? Have a listen to that and come back to us if you've got any questions. Okay, Tim, just getting through these now. How is it possible from a corporate perspective to control or stop users from inputting sensitive information into Chat GPT and the like?
Mhm. So again, I'll kind of won't rehash what I've gone over before around the sort of that traditional sort of data leakage. But again, this is where you really want to do all of those things, absolutely. But you really want to have a stance on usage, right? Is the use of Chat GPT okay in your business? Is that the AI tool of choice? If it is, what's the acceptable usage of it? Train your staff on it. Once you've done all that, you've got technical controls in place, right? So in terms of, and again, not to rehash the data leakage side of things there, but if ChatGPT is okay, what other AI engines are or are not okay, and you can put in, there's various technical controls that you can put in to sort of prevent access to the ones that you've decided are not okay, and enable access to things that you have decided are okay. So in terms of directing people towards stuff that you think is okay, you can use things like uh, Office 365, which is the authentication and directory system that underpins that. You can tie into other services, right? So you can do what's called single sign-on and app publishing and things like that within Office 365. Any of our existing First Focus clients would be familiar with that because it's how you get into your F-Protect now. It's how you access your security training that we put out. Really sort of drives you to be able to access everything within that 1365 portal, which makes it easy for users, which makes them more likely to do the right thing. In terms of stopping them from access to the things that you decide are not okay, you might use web filtering, you might use secured DNS, you might use what's called a cloud access security broker. There's a plethora of security options out there to try and stop people from accessing the things that the business has decided not okay. Now, they all need investment, they all need management, they all need maintenance, but there is technical options available there.
Right. So that's really about, sorry, I got slightly distracted, but being able to proactively see if your team is starting to use ChatGPT when perhaps policies say that they shouldn't. There's a policy aspect and there's a proactive, almost,
Correct.
you know,
Yeah.
ambulance at the
Yeah.
top of the cliff rather than
And,
bottom.
and this is kind of why I say, the worst thing you can do is do nothing, right? Because if you don't give your staff direction, they might be the best intentioned staff in the world. They might be the most excellent staff in the world. They might still give a whole bunch of data that's not otherwise secured or that they legitimately have access to for their jobs to an AI engine whose training statement says that anything you upload will be ingested and used in the training set. And then you all of a sudden you're staring at a data leakage scenario that you probably wanted to avoid to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've got time for one more, and it's just come through from David. David, I'm going to read out the question to Dan, just in case I don't understand it properly or I'm not doing a good job of conveying it. Feel free to just type as well that a yes, if you would like to actually just handle this one if I take you off mute, and you can have a quick chat with Dan. But what David has said is very informative. Thank you, David. What are you addressing, or sorry, what are you advising clients with in regards to ensuring the data is in order in-house? In terms of being as important as protecting externally?
So the biggest thing here, and this is the thing that I guess a lot of organizations skip over, is if you go back to sort of your traditional risk management, cybersecurity tenants there, where you're looking at that CIA triad and what sort of controls you're going to have in place to promote various aspects of that, is how are you tracking your assets at the moment? Because information and data is an asset that a lot of businesses don't track. They'll track the computers, they'll track the monitors, they'll track the iPads, the mobile phones, the firewalls, the servers, everything else. Are you tracking your data? Do you know where your data is? So that's the first key, is actually know where your various pieces of corporate data reside, and then you can start to construct controls around them, right? That's what you use to base your confidentiality classification system off, rather. Sorry, a bit tongue-tied there. But once you know where they are, you can make decisions around how you want it to be treated. If you've got data that's just sprawling network drives, if it's on SharePoint, things like that, then yeah, obviously it becomes very hard to put any sort of controls in place that are, sort of, except for the most sort of broad and widest reaching controls. If you want to get specific around that, you need to know where all the data assets are.
That's, hopefully that answered David's question. If not, the good news is, while we do have to wrap up now, we are going to be sending out an email tomorrow, as we said, with the slide deck, with the recording, but also with a special offer, which will be a chance to sit down for 30 minutes at no charge with Dan to go through more specific details to your business, your industry, the challenges you're facing, and some high-level information as to how you can maybe mitigate any risks or capitalize on some opportunities. So keep an eye out for an email that will be coming out tomorrow, and we will give you more information in that. And lastly, just because I didn't say it enough, podcast, business focus, usual platforms, take a look. It's great. It's pretty good. We're only episode 1. Episode 2 comes out Monday, but get involved. That'd be great. Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Thank you to everyone for sticking on. We've had really good retention, actually, this webinar. Very few people have dropped off, so that says to me that Dan has done a great job. Thank you again. Please fill out the poll, and we will see you again soon.